This day's going to be bad, the kind of day of which I dread since I began. All your questions will be answered, you won't like a single one. This will be my most despised review of all.
Oh, that's right, Sonic Adventure 2, a game that I get a lot of questions about. For the current generation of Sonic fans, this was most likely their first and most loved game. For a game to commemorate the 10th anniversary, I feel this game was such a disappointment to me. I feel that nearly every decision that was made was just awful, and if you talk to Sonic fans that have been with the series since 1991, at least the ones that I talk to, they'll say that this was the game when Sonic started that near 10-year nosedive into the ground. Now keep in mind, this is coming from the perspective of someone who has been with the Sonic franchise since the very first Sonic game and played every single Sonic game since then. There is and will be a difference in opinions from someone who started with Sonic 1 and worked their way up to the most recent title, while someone who started with Sonic Adventure 2 and worked their way backwards thanks to compilations like Mega Collection, Sonic Gems, or just using emulators, their opinion will be different. For example, you'll see a lot of older Sonic fans saying that Sonic CD was the best, and you'll see a lot of younger Sonic fans saying that Sonic Adventure 2 was the best. And from my experience, a lot of the young Sonic fans who say that Sonic Adventure 2 is the best will also say that it was their first Sonic game or first video game they ever played. That reasoning is flawed, because you can have fond memories of a game, but after many years of not playing it and then returning to it, the game may not be as awesome as you remembered. I remember loving this game when I was 16, but as I got older and looked back, I asked myself, why did I like it so much? Because it's not as good as I remembered. To me, this is the most overrated Sonic game of all time. I don't see how anyone can say that this is still the best when compared to Sonic Colors or Sonic Generations. In my opinion, Sonic Adventure 2 doesn't even hold a candle to Sonic Generations. I do understand that people really love this game. That's why I'm not going to bash it, and I'm going to be as reasonable and diplomatic as I can be. These are just my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on the game, on why I find it disappointing. So since I'm going to be reasonable, I ask that you be the same, although I have a feeling that's going to fall on deaf ears.
But what is it about this game that strikes the chord of disappointment on my proverbial piano? Well, first, I'm going to go over the stuff that I like.
When Sonic Adventure 2 was coming out, the rumor mill was essentially saying that Shadow and Rouge were from an alternate dimension that Eggman unwittingly released into our world and were causing havoc. That sounds like an awesome story, but sadly, that didn't happen. Instead, we got a lame story of revenge that cops out at the end. Before I get into any criticisms, the graphics are pretty good, although I don't think that they've aged that well. It runs at a constant 60 frames per second, the music is really good. My favorite stage music is Green Forest. I know that a lot of people love City Escapes, but that one kinda hurts my ears a little. Although I hate Knuckles' stage music, with those god-awful booty rhymes that do not and will not, in any way, shape, form, or in any universe, fit his character. I do love Rouge's music though. It's really upbeat and jazzy sounding, perfectly fitting her character. And I love Eggman's theme. That is probably by far the best character theme music ever in this franchise. The Chow Garden is greatly improved with more options and variety in how to raise your Chow and added competitions. But I grew out of that virtual pet phase many years ago, so it's not something I'm going to waste my time with. As to me, there isn't that much of a reward for hours upon hours of monotonous and menial virtual animal petting and feeding. Also, this game is fast. Very fast. They did a really good job focusing on the speed of the game. Even the treasure hunting and shooting stages feel fast. The voice acting for Shadow, Rouge, Eggman, and Knuckles is really good. In fact, it's phenomenal. Sonic's voice acting, however, is kinda spotty with certain lines, almost speaking phonetically at times like Ryan Drummond didn't know how to pronounce the words he was reading. And Tails is even worse, speaking like a robot almost the whole game, which I find odd because in Sonic Adventure and Sonic Heroes they sounded fine. And I never liked Amy's English voice, so I won't get into that. And on a little side note, Rouge's voice sounds like it was done over the phone, as the sound quality isn't as clear as the others. There's also times where Eggman's voice just fades to the point where it sounds like he's whispering, and the characters talk over each other at times too.
First, I'm gonna wade into some nitpicks, just little things that bother me, like the animation.
I'm not talking about the animation in the stages, they use motion capture for those. but I mean during the cutscenes. Sometimes the animation in the cutscenes is good, other times it's like watching a marionette puppet show like Team America. Amy, Eggman, and Sonic probably have the more cartoonish of animations, like when Eggman reads the newspaper that Rouge shows him. He's bent at the knees, pointing at the paper with all of his fingers, arm fully extended and leaning in an odd direction. That's just hilarious in how it looks. It really looks like they're all being controlled with strings. I've gone to college for animation, and the way some of these characters are animated in the cutscenes is below amateur. I know the first Sonic Adventure animations weren't that good either, but the style of animation looked like a cheesy 80s cartoon that was brought into 3D, but it looks better than puppets on a string. And one thing that bothers me just a tad is Sonic's running animation, and Knuckles too for that matter. You know why they have Sonic running with his hands and arms behind him for a majority of the modern games? Because it looks weird for them to be moving really fast. What they did was motion capture someone running to give Sonic a more natural run. Sounds good and I give him an A for effort. But then they sped it up, making it look odd, at least to me. But to put it in more concise words, the running animations make Sonic, and Knuckles, and Rouge for that matter, look like they're running faster than they actually are. I know that when Sonic's running at full speed, he puts his arms behind him and then it looks fine, but you only get that part of the animation when you're going down hills. I'm glad that after this game they made his running look better. I think that Sonic Unleashed and the games afterwards have the best looking running animation.
And now we're going to dive into the criticisms. Oh, this is going to be fun.
The first Sonic Adventure has 6 characters and 11 stages shared between them, but the stages were retooled for each character to give you a unique experience. So you get 6 different types of gameplay as the characters go through their own story. Sonic has high-speed gameplay, Tails has racing, Knuckles has treasure hunting, Amy has an avoid and capture and platforming type, E102 Gamma has shooting, and Big has fishing. Sonic had the bulk of the stages while the other characters averaged about 5 stages each. Sonic Adventure 2 gives you 6 characters with 4 to 5 levels each, and each pair of characters shares the same gameplay experience. So you only get 3 types of gameplay spanning across 9 levels each, giving you about 28 stages. However, like the first Sonic Adventure, each team shares similar levels just with a different layout and using the same graphics but retooled for each type of gameplay mechanics. So that 28 stages is closer to 15. I'm not counting the 2 driving stages because I consider those a minigame. And the kart racing isn't very good. If you want to play a good kart racing game, and depending on the time period, there's either Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, or Mario Kart Double Dash for you to choose from. Look at it this way. Green Forest and White Jungle are the same. Lost Colony, Eternal Engine, and Crazy Gadget are the same. Pumpkin Hill and Skyrail are the same. Mad Space and Meteor Herd are the same, and that's just a small handful. The characters are sharing the same stages, just retooled and renamed for different gameplay mechanics, giving what feels like, to me anyway, an illusion of many, many levels. At least Sonic Adventure was outright honest with it. It didn't call Ice Cap Diamond Dust Zone if I went there with a different character, unlike Sonic Adventure 2, where I go to Mission Street and it's Radical Highway. I feel like I was lied to. The stages feel really small too. I know some are bigger than others and Sonic Adventure 2 is a bigger game, but I can't help but get this feeling of claustrophobia as a majority of the stages feel very enclosed and tunnel-like. Even if the stages are set in a wide open space, I still get this feeling of being in a hallway. Yes, Sonic Adventure stages were pretty linear too, but they just felt bigger. Even though Sonic Adventure 2 has 4 more stages by my count, it just feels so much smaller. And if you think my algorithm for counting the levels is wrong, this is coming from someone who played Sonic Adventure and then played Sonic Adventure 2, not the other way around. To put my convoluted logic into plain English, while Sonic Adventure 2 appears to have more stages, it feels like it's a lot less when compared to its predecessor.
Say what you want about the fishing stages. If you know what you're doing, you can complete Big's story in about 10 minutes, so there should be no reason for complaining. But anyway, with Sonic Adventure, I feel that you just get bigger stages with that game.
Speaking of getting more, you have adventure fields in Sonic Adventure, but in the sequel, you go from stage to cutscene to stage. That also shortens the length of the game and it doesn't give you a chance to explore, which was one of the fun aspects of the first game. You felt like you were on a real adventure in the first one, getting 6 different stories told from the perspective of the character that you're playing as. When you go from stage to cutscene to stage with completely different gameplay mechanics, that breaks the natural flow of the game, and breaking the flow of the game is something that you don't do. And if you're a regular viewer, you know that when a game breaks the flow, that's something that I do not like. For example, Metroid Other M got criticized heavily for breaking the flow, going from a 3D roamer to a poorly implemented first-person shooter just to hit a weak spot and then back again.
And let's not forget about the action button. I'm sorry if this sounds like bashing, but the action button is the dumbest thing to do in any video game.
The action button. The button that you use for everything, meaning it has a chance to do everything wrong, especially during Sonic and Shadows levels, but I'll get into that in a bit. If you weren't jumping or using the homing attack, hovering or gliding, you would use this button for your attack or for utility. It works fine in Tails and Eggman stages because all you do is shoot. In Knuckles and Rouge's stages, it was used to punch, kick, dig, and dive, and it works for them too, because certain conditions have to be met for the action to take place. To kick or punch, you have to be on the ground. To dive, you have to be in the air, and to dig, you either have to be on the wall or dive into the ground. But the action button ruins Sonic and Shadows gameplay. The action button will somersault, spin dash, light dash, and use the bounce attack or magic hands if you're Sonic. The conditions for those actions are always met. To use the somersault, you have to be on the ground, but you can also be on the ground for the light dash. Since the conditions for the two results are met, hitting the action button can yield one of two results. To use the spin dash, you need to be holding the action button down, but sometimes the game will register it as tapping it and you'll somersault. This can happen to the point where you need to stand still for a few seconds before you can spin dash. Finally, the biggest offender, and this is when you're playing as Sonic, is in the air and needing to light dash and the bounce attack happens, making you plummet to your death. I could probably forgive everything about the action button if it wasn't for the bounce attack, which is really only used for one section of the one stage that you get it in. There actually is a way to skip the bounce bracelet, but you have to do a lot of things right, running at the correct speed, hitting the spring, and reaching the correct height and attacking the enemies in the right way.
Then there's the new treasure hunting mechanics. Why did they do it this way?
This was a really bad decision as it lengthens the treasure hunting stages unnecessarily. In the first Sonic adventure, whichever emerald shard you were closer to, the radar would blink, and you could find them in any order you wanted, making it faster for you to collect them. In Sonic Adventure 2, they foolishly retooled it. Instead of finding whichever emerald is closer, you have to find them in the order in which the game intends you to find them. You could be close to the second emerald, but unless you found the first, which is more than likely on the other side of the level, the radar won't blink for the second. So yes, the radar in this game is a scumbag. And the only reason why they did it this way is to add length to the game. The treasure hunting stages are generally the longest, as you can breeze through the action and shooting stages. I beat this game in 5.5 hours, and that's with cutscenes. It would have been much shorter if the radar wasn't a scumbag. And speaking of scumbags, the camera is one too. It's not bad in the action stages, it's a little wonky in the shooting stages, and it's completely broken in the treasure hunting stages. The worst being Egg Quarters, Aquatic Mine, and Death Chamber, as they are such small enclosed areas, making the camera get stuck behind everything possible. And in Egg Quarters and Death Chamber, there are places where the camera will refuse to follow and would rather zoom out, or worse, it will zoom right into the wall, making it almost impossible to find the key. Did that not come up in playtesting? If the camera gets stuck behind something, have the object fade to semi-transparent. Other games do that, and in some of the shooting stages, the camera works against you, as you'll need to go backwards to hit a switch before you can continue. And when you adjust the camera so you can see where you're going, it moves right back to where it was, making you take a literal leap of faith. The camera is even worse for the boss fights involving the characters, as it moves around or gets stuck against the wall constantly. And speaking of these fights, it's mainly Sonic and Shadow bouncing against each other until one hits the other. Knuckles and Rouge will just dance around, while Tails and Eggman fight a war of attrition. They're not well thought out fights, and the one you're fighting against will always pull the dickest of dick moves by using special powers.
And then there's the story which bothers me the most. There's so many plot holes and unanswered questions, and I'm going to run down all 3 of them and point out every single one that I found. And please, do not bring Sonic X logic into this. That's its own separate continuity.
Let's look at the hero story first. How did Sonic get captured in the first place? It's not answered. And then he has his run-in with Shadow, and Gun instantly arrives on the scene. How did they not see Shadow? And how did Sonic get caught again? Better question, why didn't he run? Sonic can go from 0 to breaking the sound barrier almost instantly. If he got away once, how come he didn't get away this time? Then we shift to Knuckles, for no reason at all. Eggman goes to steal the Master Emerald for reasons that are not explained. Knuckles smashes the Master Emerald, but what about the floating island falling into the ocean? Is that not a concern anymore? In fact, are we even on the floating island anymore, or has it been written out of the Sonic continuity after this game? And Sky Sanctuary doesn't count as Knuckles is never seen there again, and additionally, the Master Emerald and Angel Island are never seen in the main console series of games after Sonic Adventure 2. Sure, they appear in the spin-offs and handhelds a few times, but never again in the main console series. Now Tails enters the story, and at least his flows into Sonic's, where he goes to rescue him from Prison Island. He saves Amy from Eggman, and how did Amy even get there? Did she row a boat? Better question, how did she get into an aircraft carrier? We can imagine how the bad guys got there. Eggman uses mech. Rouge flew, Shadow Chaos controlled up there. But Amy? How? That's a really good question. Then Amy frees Sonic from prison. But where's Tails? He was the one who went through the stage. Then Sonic faces Shadow, and after he finds out that the island is going to blow up, he says he has to find Amy and Tails. And he was just with them and they did not say to split up. Then they all escape from Prison Island. They see Eggman blow up half the moon, and then Tails goes through Mission Street to get away, which makes you wonder why he just didn't transform his mech into a plane and fly away. And then, in the biggest stroke of plot convenience, Knuckles joins them after coming out of a manhole cover, and they discover where the president is so they can track Eggman's signal to find out where he is when they just saw the Ark blow a chunk of the moon off in the previous night.
During that whole time, he's contributing nothing to the actual story. He's just doing his own thing and was shoehorned into this game just to have an excuse for more treasure hunting stages. They could have completely left him out of the game and nothing in the story would have changed.
Tails chases the president, and then Sonic shows up out of nowhere and does nothing considering it's Tails who does all the work. Then they go to the pyramid, then go into space with a conveniently placed space shuttle. Another pointless cutscene here happens as the shuttle bay opens, releasing all of the pieces of the Master Emerald, which puts Knuckles at 0 again, and then he leaves the story. Amy gets kidnapped because Sonic and Tails, in their infinite wisdom, leave Amy by herself. Sonic gets blasted into space, escapes using a fake emerald that Tails created, which Tails never explains how he created it. He just says that he made it after studying the real one, and the explanation as how Sonic used Chaos Control with a fake emerald is not explained. Yeah, Tails says it has the same wavelength as the real emerald, but it's not as powerful, but that's not an explanation as to how Sonic did it since he's never done it before.
It's so absurd that even Shadow comments on it. Yeah, the Chaos Emeralds transform thoughts into power, but that's kind of a vague statement. And how can that happen with a fake emerald anyway?
It just feels like another plot convenience, and I know what you're thinking, and just hold that thought for a moment as I'll be bringing this scene up later. Then he battles Shadow, then we cut to Amy and Tails, the Eclipse Cannon is destroyed, and then Sonic gives the thumbs up to his friends, end of hero story. We have no idea where Knuckles is, because after he's assembled the Master Emerald, we only see him aimlessly walking around on the Ark, so Sonic has someone to talk to after he saves his own spiky butt.
You know what's really sad? It seems that the Dark Story is better thought out, almost as if they wrote it first, and then they went, oh snap, we need to have the heroes in this game too.
The Dark Story has Eggman infiltrating a military base, Free Shadow who tells him to go to the Ark if Eggman wants his help in taking over the world, although Eggman doesn't tell Shadow his goals. Then we go to Knuckles and Rouge fighting. This scene is repeated, and Eggman's reason for stealing the Master Emerald is revealed because he was told by Shadow to bring more Chaos Emeralds, and that he followed the signal but still has no reason for trying to steal the Master Emerald, as he says that he could find some use for it. Because after it's shattered, he just goes, oh well, and leaves. Rouge gets her pieces of the emerald, but that's pointless here as the story shifts back to Eggman at his base, sees Shadow stole the Chaos Emerald from the bank, which is never explained why a bank had a Chaos Emerald. Shadow has a flashback to Maria, and it's revealed that he's getting revenge on humans. Everyone mistakes him for Sonic, which I can somewhat understand. It's night, it's dark, you can't see that well. Although they do have a close-up and very clear shot of Shadow, and you can see that it's not Sonic.
But here's where it doesn't mesh. Shadow steals the emerald that night and sees Sonic the same night, but Sonic is arrested during the day, escapes, and then sees Shadow the same night. You can't explain that!
I suppose you can say that it took Shadow a long time to get from the bank to Sonic's location, but the way that it's shown is that it all happens at the same night. That's just bad narrative. Rouge then infiltrates Eggman's base, finds out what him and Shadow are up to, and then gets to the Ark by using Eggman's teleporter, which makes you wonder why he had a space shuttle. Oh, that's right. Plot convenience for the hero's story, and then she strikes a deal with them. Then the three go to Prison Island to get the 3 emeralds that the military has. For what reasons the military has them, we don't know. We don't even know why they had one in a bank. In fact, why are the humans in possession of the Chaos Emeralds? That's never happened in the Sonic games before. Because this is the first game where the emeralds are not hidden, and they also want to blow up Prison Island for some odd reason.
Actually, I could explain this one. They're gonna blow up the island because they're just doing it for the lulz.
Well, Eggman implies that blowing up the island is to cover the tracks, but then also says that they're going to be in and out before anyone notices them. If you're going to be in and out before being detected, why bother blowing it up? Isn't that a little excessive, and wouldn't that draw attention to yourself? And then this next scene proves that Amy is blind. It's the middle of the day, and she hugs Shadow thinking he's Sonic. How does she mistake black for blue, and how did she not see Eggman standing right there? I am well convinced that Amy is either blind or just way too stupid, and that she could look at herself in the mirror and think her own reflection is Sonic. And what really boggles the mind is in the hero story. She acknowledges Shadow as that black hedgehog. Is she retarded? Rouge gets the emeralds, says she's trapped. Shadow has this look on his face like he wants to laugh. He's then reminded of Maria, who he couldn't save, so he goes back for Rouge. How he manages to get into the safe where she is not explained. I suppose you could assume that he used Chaos Control off camera. On the Ark, Eggman makes his announcement to the world, destroys half the moon. Rouge then conveniently finds the last emerald in a newspaper, and then she and Shadow chase Tails in an attempt to get it, but they fail. How does Shadow fail to catch Tails? Why didn't he just borrow a Chaos Emerald from the Ark? Use Chaos Control, smack Tails around a bit. It's not like he couldn't put the emerald back. The cannon was recharging after all. But even though they fail getting the emerald, Shadow says that the heroes are heading right for Eggman's base.
You'd think that after Rouge found Tails, she would have told Eggman and Shadow that they were heading for the base.
Then they convene on the Ark. Shadow outs Rouge as a government spy. How he knows this? Not explained. Especially since Shadow was sealed in a capsule for 50 years. And how is a jewel thief a government employee too? And if Rouge is a government spy that works for Gun, why is she still employed by them? What she did in this game is treason by helping Eggman, blowing up their island base, steal the Chaos Emeralds, and threaten the world with a huge laser. Better question. If she's technically one of the good guys, why didn't she try and stop Eggman in the first place and tell her superiors that Shadow is the one who stole the emerald, which would have cleared Sonic's name?
And then Shadow leaves Rouge alone with the emeralds, free for the taking.
But anyway, Eggman kidnaps Amy, sends Sonic into space, fights Tails, Shadow fights Sonic, and Eggman puts the final emerald into the cannon. However, the final battles between Eggman and Tails and Sonic and Shadow are inconsistent with each other, and then stuff starts to go to hell.
Then it all comes together at the last story where this tale of popsicle sticks and glue falls apart.
Eggman finds his grandfather's journal, finds out that his grandfather went insane, and then you gotta ask yourself, why did Gun record this death threat and put it on the Ark? And additionally, if the military was funding his research, what made them change their mind and made them go up there and destroy and kill everything? And if the Ark was so dangerous, why didn't they destroy it instead of leaving it shut down where someone may be able to activate it again? But then Gerald Robotnik says he set up a plan for Shadow to destroy the world and program the Ark to crash into the planet when it has all 7 emeralds, which makes no sense. When did he have the time to do this? Take a minute to think about it. The Ark is invaded, Shadow is jettisoned into an escape pod, Gerald is on Earth, and you can tell he's on Earth because look at the background. That's the cell Sonic was in earlier in the game. So here's the $1,000,000 question. How did Gerald manage to do all this in his jail cell?
I hope you are all
Obviously, he did it after he went insane, but it is physically impossible for him to have done that, and the military obviously would not have allowed him to continue his research if it was so dangerous. Even if they did, they would be keeping a very close eye on him to make sure he didn't pull any funny business. The story starts to fall apart at this point in time, because that would mean Gerald would have to program the Ark to crash into the planet and program Shadow to carry out his mission before the Ark was raided in the first place. So is Gerald able to see into the future? Then, as everyone is trying to stop the Ark from crashing into the planet, Shadow goes from, "It's all going according to plan," to, "I gotta save the world," in an instant turn just because Amy said to give people a chance to be happy, which conveniently is what Maria said.
So now Shadow's instantly a good guy. Again, that seems really convenient. You're telling me, out of all the cutscenes in this game, this is where it clicks for Shadow on what he's supposed to do? Damn.
And that doesn't even make much sense, as Shadow knows Maria to be a kind person, so she wouldn't want Shadow to avenge her. And in an earlier cutscene, Shadow himself says that Professor Gerald is trying to make people happy through the power of science, which spells out Shadow's purpose right there. But doesn't know why he was created right after saying that. Also, the Bio-Lizard uses Chaos Control. How it knows how to use it is not explained. Also, after Shadow sees the Bio-Lizard use Chaos Control, Shadow asks, and I quote, "Is that what Chaos Control is?" How does he not know? He's used it twice in the Dark Side story. He's been able to use Chaos Control his whole life. That is the equivalent to someone urinating their whole life, and when they see someone else doing it, they ask if that's what urinating is. Then they save the world. How does Sonic make it back but Shadow doesn't? They were standing right next to each other and did Chaos Control together. Everyone assumes Shadow died and it leaves on a bittersweet ending. Eggman sounds like he's going to turn over a new leaf and everyone leaves together on a peaceful note. And as far as we know, the government is still looking for Sonic to arrest him for stealing the Chaos Emerald. That's something that's left open. You gotta have a powerful suspension of disbelief for the story. So many questions go unanswered, and these are questions that you really can't ignore. Characters appear out of nowhere simply for plot convenience, like Amy appearing on Prison Island or Knuckles just popping out of a manhole cover.
And there's other things that bother me too, like how Knuckles was not needed for this game.
Let's look at Knuckles' purpose in the first game. Eggman shatters the Master Emerald so he can release Chaos. Angel Island falls into the ocean and Knuckles sets out on a quest to put it back together. Now let's look at Sonic Adventure 2. The Master Emerald is obviously not on Angel Island, as Knuckles is not worried about it falling into the ocean, as he smashes the emerald himself instead of dislodging it and fighting Eggman. If this scene didn't happen, the story would have gone on like normal. The door to Eggman's base would have already been unlocked, because Rouge infiltrated Eggman's base earlier, or maybe because Eggman let them in to try and get the emerald that they have. And at the end, when he uses the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds, it doesn't do any good because the Bio-Lizard would have still fused with the Ark to carry out the plan. I'm not hating on Knuckles, but you can write him out of the story and nothing changes, as his contribution to it is insignificant to the point of it being nil. I imagine that if Knuckles wasn't in the game, Rouge would have completely different gameplay, and with her being a spy, she would have stealth gameplay like Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid series. Now that would be cool.
And you know what? Same goes for Amy.
Amy also has no actual contribution to the story. She doesn't help any of the main characters and is more of a distraction. She doesn't need to unlock the jail cell Sonic was in. Tails could have done that. After all, you played as him in the stage before. And at the end, Rouge could have reminded Shadow his promise to Maria. Really, the only thing that Amy contributes is getting captured by Eggman so that he could launch Sonic into space. But also, this could have been bypassed by having Eggman just chase after Tails and the fight ensues while Sonic makes his way to the cannon to blow it up. I really do feel that Knuckles and Amy were just in there for fan service, just because their contribution is so insignificant when compared to the other characters. It's rumored that Tails, Rouge, and Shadow's gameplay was added in at the last minute to compete with Eggman, Knuckles, and Sonic. However, I don't trust the sources where that rumor comes from, as it's possible that it's citing the teaser trailer for the prototype that was released in the year 2000. And I say rumor because there's other sources that either conflict with it or just don't mention it. For example, other sources cite that Sonic Team was intent on keeping people in the dark about things because they wanted Shadow to be a surprise, and they were saying that the teaser trailer was just that, a teaser. And when Toy Island leaked the Shadow and Rouge were playable characters in their next line of action figures, and ironically they went out of business before the toys were released, Sega just came out with the truth afterwards. But those are only two examples. I'm sure that everyone has their own little spin on Sonic Adventure 2's development history. So you can believe whatever you want to believe, because I just don't care that much about this game's development history.
Another thing that bothers me is that there's timestamps that serve no purpose.
What I mean by this is that the timing of events for both stories is a little off, and that's putting it nicely. If you watch each story separately, it's all well and good, but when you realize that both stories are happening at the same time, things are a little out of place. If you play the hero story first, Sonic escapes at 1327. Then the game transitions to night where he fights the boss and meets Shadow. Then it's 1108 the next morning and Knuckles is arguing with Rouge over the Master Emerald. Sounds fine, right? Well, let's look at the Dark Side story. The Dark story starts off with a timestamp of 2102, then transitions to the cutscene with Knuckles and Rouge at 1108. Then at 2022 is around the time when Eggman sees the news flash of Shadow stealing the Emerald. So what I gathered from this, and keep in mind, this is my theory of how the following events take place, is that Shadow is freed, which is the first event of the game. The following morning, Eggman tries to steal the Master Emerald, and that's when Wild Canyon and Dry Lagoon take place. Then Eggman goes to his base that night and sees the newsflash where Shadow is identified as Sonic. Because the newsflash does not say that Sonic escaped custody, that means that City Escape has yet to happen. So the first 4 stages of the Dark story happened before City Escape. Then Sonic is arrested the next day and meets Shadow that night, meaning it took Shadow 48 hours from being released to stealing the Emerald to meeting Sonic. Because the game lacks dates in which the events occur, we can only assume that this is how things play out, as the Dark story makes more sense. And my example of the timeline is also the most simple and less confusing one.
And I've heard people saying that Sonic Adventure 1 story is even more inconsistent. However, I don't think it is.
Sonic Adventure takes a unique and dynamic approach to storytelling. The game has 6 different stories that all revolve around a major plot element, which is the looming threat of perfect chaos wreaking havoc. Each of the 6 stories is told through the perspective of the character you're playing as. So yes, some scenes may be different for other characters because it's through their perspective, because their experience are different from the others, making each character a narrator. Sonic Adventure 2, on the other hand, is told through the perspective of a single narrator that's trying to tell 2 stories, and that's where all the inconsistencies that I've pointed out are coming from. If there were no timestamps, you could put Iron Gate first, then put City Escape, Wild Canyon, Sand Ocean, Dry Lagoon, and Radical Highway all on the same day. But because of the timestamps and the cutscene in Eggman's base, it doesn't allow you to do that, because it solidifies the time in which the events occur according to the line that I've illustrated. And my final thoughts. The only stages that I find fun are Sonic and Shadow's, and they are the more well done stages, so that's only 1/3 of the game. But I find Shadow's stages to be lacking when compared to Sonic's, which seem to offer more, taking that 1/3 to about 1/6. So I only enjoy 6 out of the 30-something stages. To me, that feels like a waste. The game feels really finicky when giving out A ranks. Sometimes it almost feels like it's impossible to achieve an A rank as the parameters change for each stage and mission. Additionally, the game feels like it rewards very little points. You can perform a bunch of tricks or kill a bunch of enemies in a chain, but it feels like unless you do everything perfect in as little time as possible, you're not going to get an A rank. The perfect example of this is in Metal Harbor. To get an A rank, you need to grab onto the top of the missile before it takes off, which is easier said than done as you only have 15 seconds. And you have to do everything fast and perfect. You screw up once, you'll have to do it all over. Then it feels like a slap in the face when you can put no effort into a stage and get an A rank, but then you work really hard to get that perfect score in a stage, only to be rewarded with a B rank. I find it odd that I could get a C in Wild Canyon, while in Dry Lagoon I'll get an A. They're at the same stage with a few minor differences. Why are the parameters different for the A rank?
And that's what I think of Sonic Adventure 2. This is the most detailed review I have ever done, just so I could answer every single question that may come up. To me, this is a decent game at the most. And these are all the reasons of why I find that this game is just way too flawed to be considered the best.